Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as fait manquer. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Bruxelles, je t'aime. T'es ma préférée. Bruxelles, je t'aime. Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Bruxelles, je t'aime, Euronews' talk show all about the European capital of Brussels. On Brussels, my love, we break down some of the European stories that caught our eye this week, examine what's at stake for you and for Europe. My name is Maeve McMahon. Thanks for joining us. Coming up this week, more women in the boardroom. After the nod from the European Parliament in Strasbourg recently, the EU will introduce quotas to improve gender balance among listed companies in Europe. Blocked for 10 years while the former German Chancellor Angela Merkel was in power, we take a look at what will change for women in Europe and for the corporate world and check what else the European Union can do for gender equality at the workplace. And riots in Brussels. What went wrong? We take a look at the violence and vandalism after a recent World Cup game between Morocco and Belgium. People threw items at the police and set a car on fire. Although only a handful of thugs are to blame, the images went viral and have tainted the image of the Moroccans here in Brussels and become fodder for some politicians to stir divisions in society. We ask what happened, if the police were perhaps too provocative, or if Brussels has a segregation problem. To talk about all this and more, I'm joined here in the studio by Lara Wolters, a Dutch socialist MEP, Soundas Boulam, the Chief Impact Officer at the Brussels Global Review, and Ahmed Wali, a sociologist and researcher at the VUB here in Brussels. That's the Vrije Universiteit Brussel. Thank you so much for being with us here. And of course, that directive, that Women on Boards directive, is where we will start this show. It finally became a reality. European companies will have until June 2026 to comply with those targets. Before I hear from you all, let's just remind our viewers what these quotas aim to achieve. Take a look.
Why diversity? Why women on board?
After a decade of deadlock, the European Union has decided to impose gender quotas. The goal, to ensure women make up 40% of seats on the boards of large companies. Publicly listed businesses in all 27 EU member states will have to ensure women take up at least 40% of non-executive board seats, or 33% of all board director roles by mid-2026. If they fail to comply, companies could be fined and see directorial appointments cancelled for non-compliance with the law.
As more diverse boards hire more diverse CEOs, who, in turn, hire more diverse managers, that's what counts.
EU countries now have 2 years to enshrine the new law. The challenge then, to ensure companies get on board and make Europe's gender balance more nuanced.
So, Lara Wolters, I imagine you were celebrating this news this week because you were, of course, the rapporteur of this file. That means you were the lady in charge of this over the last couple of years.
That's correct. And we did have a little glass of champagne in Strasbourg to celebrate that at last we'll be getting more women in boardrooms in Europe.
And why did it take so long?
That's a question for European member states. The European Parliament from the get-go said, well, we need more egalitarian boardrooms. We need boardrooms to be a better reflection of society. Member states said, not so fast. We'll handle this on our own. We'll be doing this in our own capitals. You just sit tight and wait and better times will come. And they didn't.
And what about yourself, Soundas? Did you follow the news? What's your reaction?
I did. First of all, congratulations, Lara. I can imagine it's been a lot of work, but it's great news for gender equality in the workplace because boardrooms are where strategic decisions are being made, and we need women to be making strategic decisions in order to enable other women to make it to the top.
And women obviously need to be supported by men. Ahmed, what's your reaction to that directive?
Yes, exactly. So I'm also a bit surprised that why it came a bit too late for Europe, but it's a great step, and I hope that as a researcher, as a sociologist, I'm afraid that it would not remain as a binary gender, male-female in the statistics or by number, but it should be an actual change between men and women, not only men and women, but all minorities, and also the intersectionality should be taken into account in that aspect.
Well, one lady that was also celebrating this week was Therese Palink. She is a Belgian board member and she's also the head of Women on Board. That's an initiative created by 5 women to promote female access to high-ranking positions. You can take a listen now to Therese Palink.
Diversity is power. and where men and women are together, they discuss more, they discuss broader, they all act for the goal and the purpose of the company, and there is, let's say, less room for ego. It has been demonstrated where there are women on boards, there is more attention for sustainability, climate issues, well-being. I think these are very important reasons to be happy and to welcome the European directive.
So less room for ego there, Lara Wolters. Do you come across a lot of egos in your job?
I do, but I think what's more important is the egos that we see in those boardrooms of those very big companies. And if you look, for instance, at what's going on in Twitter at the moment, and Elon Musk asking his employees to commit to a hardcore working culture or else be fired, I think what Sundus just said is very relevant. I mean, these are the heavy-hitting companies, the largest companies, and what they do, how they behave themselves, the decisions that they take, those impact on our society. And so my view's always been, if they impact on our societies with what they do or don't do, then society ought to impact on them.
And it's interesting how this directive actually came about. It was in fact the brainchild of a former European Commissioner, Viviane Reding from Luxembourg, because she always said that in her career she always had to adapt to situations, to the men around her, that she felt like she wasn't listened to until she became an EU Commissioner. And that's when back then she decided to put the proposal on the table. First she had a plan for it to be voluntary, but then she said no, it must be compulsory or otherwise it will be ignored, right, Ahmed?
Yes, exactly. Also, as I mentioned, we have to move forward with what we put in quotas, but the future implication of this to make an environment for all genders, especially for women, to feel themselves and to enjoy their work, rather than making an environment that they feel obliged to live, and the turnouts and the turnovers and these things are really important to be taken into consideration in the future field work. But I believe that this is a very good step, a very first step. Because the companies could really benefit from this in a way that they allow the harmony and the joy in the workplace.
But it's interesting because from the company's perspective, I mean, the business lobbies were against this directive, Sundus. They argued that they shouldn't first be compulsory, these quotas, and also that they wouldn't find enough women. What would you say to them?
That's the remnant of patriarchy that has been going on for way too long in this world. But something that Lara touched upon very wisely is that we need women at the top to understand what working conditions really mean for other women, because so far it's been mainly men, and they don't take into consideration all of the unpaid labor that women have to perform, the fact that women have to juggle so many other things. The pandemic especially has shown how toxic working conditions were in big companies, and this has touched mainly women because, again, they were at home with children, having to do unpaid labor and having to perform at work. So really, men saying that just shows that they do not grasp all of the different factors and conditions that women have to fulfill daily.
And Sundus, you mentioned the pandemic and
Yes.
the recession, of course, that came with it. And the OECD have coined that the she-demic, saying that it was mostly women, the she-session, that it was women who were impacted the mostly because they, of course, were doing the majority of the caring, the majority of the housework. But we'll come back to that a little bit later, because I just wanted to point out the fact that a lot of women also blocked this proposal. They blocked this directive. A lot of women from the Christian Democrats Party, and also some women from the European Parliament. They have gone against the proposal, and we actually had the opportunity to talk to one of them, to Arba Kukalari. She's the coordinator of women's rights and gender equality. She voted against the directive. Let's take a listen to her arguments.
I voted against for two reasons. The first one is because I don't think that it's up to politicians or the EU to decide who is going to sit on the boards of private companies. I think it's a violation of property rights and the right of free enterprise. The second reason is because I don't think that we will solve the gender equality issues in Europe by making some kind of quick fix or a symbolic law only for very few women that are already on top on the businesses.
Swedish MEP Arba Kokalari there, you are nodding your head there.
It's amusing to me because it's misguided in so many ways. These are not private companies, these are public companies that we're talking about. We're not choosing who gets to sit on a board. That's up to companies themselves. What we're saying is there needs to be a balance there. And my colleague here says, this is not the way to achieve further gender equality. I completely agree with her, but I've never seen the Christian Democrats in the party, in the parliament, been the forerunner of further gender equality. There's a lot of things we're trying to do at the moment in Parliament. We're talking about further wage transparency. We're talking about paternity and maternity leave that needs to be increased, care leave, etc. I don't see them being at the forefront of that fight. And if she wants to do more, then I'll very gladly pair up with her to get that done.
I imagine they're the kind of conversations, or they're the different opinions that you've been hearing for a long time as you've been working on this file since Brexit, right? Since 2016?
Absolutely. And what she is correct about is that this problem is wider. This is a problem of our societies that are very much geared towards people being able to make money in full-time jobs. And that is a problem that is a masculine problem in the sense that we're not asking everybody to work less to achieve gender equality. What we're saying is, and I don't agree with this, we all need to be able to work in full-time jobs regardless of what that means for caring for children, for the elderly, what it means at home. I think it'd be much more healthy if we went and said, look, in our societies today, we're doing something that's rather short-termist. We're doing something that, in a sense, is cannibalistic on our own societies, because what we're doing is we're trying to get everyone into a rat race of full-time work, never mind the consequences. So I think we need to do this from the top down and from the bottom up.
And there's a big debate, of course, now as well about whether we should have a 4-day week, but that's a debate that we'll have another day. Anything you'd like to add there?
Yes, because one thing that's so important with this directive is positive representation. And where I disagree, this is not a quick fix. It's actually a long-term fix, because the more women at the top we have, and the more other women feel empowered and motivated to work harder to make it there. Because for now, the fact that the world is dominated by high executives who are men just sends the signal to women that why try anyway, since...
And whatever, Ahmed, yeah, go ahead.
I think also why this comes is, I think it's based on a fear, and the fear that men have created in these arguments, and these arguments basically comes from the main perspective, and I think there's no space, or there shouldn't be any fear in this, because going back so far, we have only focused from academic perspective or from research perspective on the numbers, on how many people we have and how many we don't have. But if we go in depth, and we have to make cases and deep research on that to bring more evidence, not evidence based on the numbers and the statistics, but evidence based on the cases on in-depth basis, then we can really show that it's a great step not only for women but also for men as well, because the fear that they have, it would be proven meaningless.
Okay, and whatever though your opinion is on this directive, on the Women on Boards directive, the picture is very different across the European Union today when it comes to women on boards. We can see when it comes to the share of women back on boards, back in 2003, there was just 8.2%. That jumped to 11.8% by 2010, and by 2021 it was 30.6%. Proof perhaps that quotas actually do work, but the picture, of course, and the share of women on boards very different, with France up at the top of the class across the continent with 46.3%, and Denmark coming in at 38.7%, but down at the bottom you've Hungary at 10.5% and Bulgaria at 16%. And politically, there's different political will, of course, across the continent. Some want to go really far and some don't want to change anything. Like here in Belgium, there are gender quotas that are mandatory, also in Italy, Germany, Austria, Portugal, Greece and the Netherlands. And then there's guidelines but no laws in countries like Denmark, Estonia, Ireland, Spain, Luxembourg, Poland, Romania and Slovenia. And then there's no action in countries like Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Croatia, Cyprus, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta and Slovakia. Lara Wolters, your reaction to that, how to create a more...
That's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information, I know.
But what I take from that is that what we're doing here is we're forcing through culture change. And why are we doing that? Because waiting doesn't work. And those examples you mentioned of the forerunners, the countries like France, where now you can see an almost balanced situation at board level, that is exactly because quotas. If you look at the research, you see that those countries that have taken action with quotas and with laws, those now do better. Things are being sped up. You can have different views on quotas. I don't think you can argue with the research there.
And you would agree with that, I would imagine.
I agree, but quotas, it's the minimum for now, because if we look even on the countries that you mentioned that they have higher percentages, then when you go deep into that and you see, for example, the turnover with women actually working in that, the women in most of the cases they can survive there because the system is designed in a way that if you're a woman and then you have other responsibilities and you have a family, then you wouldn't be able to adapt yourself into that because the workplace is not adapted to that. So I think quotas is a first step, but then now we have to we have
further.
a lot of other.
And that's the conversation we're having here today.
Yeah.
Is what else can the European Union do? Because a big concern again across the continent for women is the gender pay gap. And did you all know that November the 15th actually marked Equal Pay Day across the continent, as women marked the fact that they now continue to make 13% less than their male colleagues for the same job. And since then, since that date, women in the European Union have essentially been working for free and will do so till the end of the year compared to their male counterparts. So ladies, should we just head off?
I reckon after this we go home, put our feet up.
Yeah, that sounds tempting, doesn't it? But no, on a serious note, Sundus, I mean, this is really worrying. And this is a story, in fact, I've been reporting on for the last couple of years on Euronews, and it's really very slow, the progress over the last couple of years.
It is indeed. What's worrying, as I mentioned, is not only are women paid less, but they are expected to do more because the unpaid labor sector accounts for millions, even billions perhaps, all over the world. And the issue with the gender, pay gap is that essentially women are expected to do the same as men, be at the office just like men do, focus on their careers, but at the same time do a chunk aside from that is way bigger than what men do. So I believe women are simply tired of being expected to be superheroes while actually being treated like the weaker gender. And this is what's happening with the gender pay gap.
And so maybe you can elaborate on what the European Union can actually do, what policies you're actually working on to address what Sundus has been highlighting earlier, and of course Ahmed talking about women.
I find this a little bit I very much agree with Sundus, but I find this a little bit the sort of lean in problem in that there's a strand of feminism that says, well, what we need to do as women to get to gender inequality is lean in, and what we need to do is sort of man up, and we need to do the same as men do in putting in as many hours, etc. In society as a whole, that is not possible because, as Sundus said, there's a whole lot of unpaid work at home that needs to happen too. For that to happen and for things to really be equal, men need to step up and do that too. But I think that what we're in is this narrative of we need to do things in the same way as all over corporate Europe in terms of full-time jobs. I don't think that's the answer. What we need is structural solutions, and what those look like is much more focus on the first 1,000 days of a child's life, much more quality childcare with staff that is better paid. All those underpaid and undervalued jobs that women are in the care sector, in education, all of those need to be better paid, more respected, and we need to invest in those. And so I would very much plead for what we need is not for women to lean in and to be superheroes, as you said. It's absolutely impossible. What we all need to do is get to a society that's more sustainable and more feminine in a way.
And that's you as a sociologist, essentially, what you're
Yes, actually, the pay gap is not the only challenge there. I hope that this equality or the quota would not be like a cosmetic for the sake of like male-female thing, but because we shouldn't see this thing as a binary. When we talk, we should also be taking into consideration the different categories of women, minorities like LGBTQI, women migrants, and also refugees and the new population of Europe that are there. We should make a space, or this should take us toward the direction that we include all those population also.
Okay, fair point. Thank you so much for that, Ahmed.
And men
Stay
need
with
to
us
step up
because
more.
after
Yes.
that's all I'm afraid we have time for on this topic, but do not go anywhere. After the break, we will cross-examine some images of Brussels when post-football celebrations turned ugly. See you soon here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, with me, Maeve McMahon, where we are picking apart some of the stories that caught our eye across Europe this week. So I'd like to ask my panel, did you see the images of Brussels last weekend when after a match took place between Morocco and Belgium? Violence erupted and we saw people throw things at police and we saw a car being put on fire.
Yes, I did see the image, as most of the world or all of the world did. First of all, there is absolutely no excuse for violence of any sort. And I'd like to start by saying this is not representative of being Moroccan or being a Muslim, nor of what our community's values are. But what saddens me is from a narrative perspective, I feel these kind of images always go viral when it concerns African, Arab communities in Europe. But a few weeks back, when there were riots in France caused by German football fans after a football game between Cologne and Nice, the images didn't go as viral and people didn't focus as much on these, which shows the bias present in Europe towards Muslim, Moroccan, African communities.
I agree with the narrative problem. This is a very small group of people that are ruining it for all of those who are enjoying that match. I do think that there's a general problem with football hooliganism, and that hooliganism in my country, the Netherlands, is very much present. It's absolutely not a problem of a particular community. It's widespread and it's unacceptable. I found this unacceptable too, to see that sort of destruction in a match that was won makes you wonder what would have happened if they lost.
It certainly dampened the mood for the Moroccan community here in Brussels. Ahmed, was it hooliganism, do you think?
As Sundus mentioned, riots or hooliganism or distraction is not justifiable, but it's also, I would see it as more of a frustration, as being sidelined or as being deprived of something and having the opportunity to show that I exist.
And to get his reaction, I went to the town hall this week of Brussels to speak to the mayor, Philippe Close, to ask him if he thought that Brussels perhaps had a deeper problem, an issue of segregation. We can take a listen now to Philippe Close.
No, I do not think so. I think we managed to live together in Brussels. With 184 nationalities, we are the second most cosmopolitan city in the world. There are a lot of things that are obviously going very well, but there are, like in any other cities, security problems. But I repeat, the riots were confined to a very small area of Brussels. In 2 hours, order was restored.
So Philippe Close there, the mayor of Brussels, saying that Brussels lives very well together with 184 nationalities. Ahmed, would you agree?
I do agree. We have a large diversity in Brussels, but unfortunately, we haven't done much to bring that diversity for an absolute profit or win-win situation. There has been we have been doing research at the university for the last 30, 40 years, and there are a lot of evidence showing the segregation, deprivation of certain minorities, communities, and unfortunately this is not the first time this thing happening. Last year it occurred again, and the reaction of the government was the police came in and they say that we will do prosecution or we would look for it, but I believe that it's not the job of the police, it's not the job of prosecuting. We have to really fundamentally look at this and tackle the problem.
Well, that's a question, Sundus, I'd like to pose to you, because I was actually downtown in Brussels just ahead of this happening, and the police were already mobilising. They were waiting for the violence. Do you think they were almost a little bit too provocative?
It's an interesting question. I think it's only fair that the police is ready because violence has been happening over and over, not only in Belgium, but also in France after several football games. So let's be honest, there is actually a problem. I disagree with some of what the mayor said. Of course, I love Brussels more than any city. It's a very cosmopolitan, beautiful city, but all over Europe, there is a problem of segregation of these communities that's sometimes result in violence. But instead of looking at the violent acts, we need to ask ourselves, why are these young people feeling so isolated that they need to outward that through violence? They live in environments where they are secluded, there's bad transport in those areas, they don't have much going on, so of course they will explode at some point.
And there's a lot of studies that we've in fact reported on here at Euronews showing the discrimination against different ethnic groups, the Turkish, the Moroccans, based even on their names, not accessing the labour market or even a place to live. And also the other problem, which you've probably seen this week within the European Parliament, is how a number of politicians have been using this story. We can take a look at a tweet by Tom van Grieken. He is from the far right, the Vlaams Belang political party here in Belgium. And he tweeted saying, "We have a Moroccan problem. They're responsible for the drug problem, the World Cup violence and the violence on New Year's Eve." So Sundus, very divisive tweet there.
That's their political strategy. They play on fear and hatred, and of course they will pinpoint a specific ethnicity or culture or country because it gets them more voters, and it also it fits their narrative that they blame foreigners for a problem that is actually theirs. They are the ones causing the hatred and fear that it's then creating a vicious cycle here in Europe where people are afraid and these communities feel more isolated and threatened and feared, and it's just a lot of negativity.
And it's very similar in your country, in the Netherlands.
It is, and the easy answer is always, we need more repression, we need more police, we need tougher sanctions, and then everything will be fine. That's what the far right will always peddle when these stories surface. The more difficult answer is, of course, we need investment in these communities. We need long-term solutions. We need to make sure that people don't feel ostracized, alienated, that they feel that there's opportunities. That means investing in education. That means making sure that people have proper houses to live in where they feel that they can do something else and merely survive. That's the difficult answer. That's the long-term answer. That's a question of thinking in the long term about what society we want to live in. That's a more difficult answer than a silly tweet that is extra divisive.
So Ahmed, just very briefly, what should the to-do list be for policymakers here in Belgium and beyond?
I think we have some very good examples from different cities in Europe and even in Belgium that they understood the first step should be to accept the problem. Then make a step. Like we have the city Mechelen, for example. They started in 2000, and then in 2016 the mayor even got the prize of being the best mayor. And when I talked to him in person for a project, he explained me how they tackled and how they made everyone feel engaged.
I'm going to have to stop you there. That is all I'm afraid we have time for on that topic. But don't go anywhere. See you soon right here on Euronews and Euronews.com. Welcome back to Brussels, my love, with me, Maeve McMahon, where we are picking apart some of the stories across Europe this week. One item that made the headlines this week in Europe was this. Do you know why?
I know that Macron tweeted a picture about it and about, I think, the situation in French bakeries.
No, almost. Emmanuel Macron did tweet about it.
I think I know, because it was recorded in the UNESCO World
Absolutely,
Heritage.
Oh, right.
yes. This long crusty loaf that tastes delicious with a bit of butter and jam is not just a baguette. As of this week, it is now officially recognised as a UNESCO item. It's on the Intangible Cultural Heritage list. What do you think of that, Sundus?
That's good news. There are even countries where they have festivals to celebrate bread, such as Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But it's absolutely hilarious. You must take a look at the UNESCO list and see all the other things that managed to get on that list. There was bell ringing in Spain, beekeeping in Slovenia, modern dance in Germany. I mean, is it a little bit funny?
Even outside Europe, Iran and Afghanistan, the longest night of the night that they call it the Chela or Yalda night, that was also included similarly in the World Heritage. But I think that's good to appreciate our culture, our diversity, our heritages.
Yeah, and Lara, you mentioned the Emmanuel Macron tweet. Well, absolutely, he tweeted a French child holding a baguette. It was a tweet that said 250 grams of magic and perfection in our daily lives. A French way of life. We've been fighting for years with bakers and the world of gastronomy for its recognition, and now we have gotten there. And he wasn't the only one celebrating. There was also pictures of the UNESCO delegation, French, obviously holding up the baguette, taking selfies, really celebrating this good news story for France. I mean, what about yourself? Is there any product or dish that you think should be on that list?
Couscous. Definitely. If bread made it, couscous should be on there. Yes.
And you?
Rice, different sort of cooking of rice, like pulao or something.
Well, other things that are on that list, Belgian beer culture, pizza from Naples, Indian yoga, because it's not just about the items, it's also about the knowledge behind the creation of them. But I guess another debate we're having today is whether we can afford a baguette even, and whether we need to start baking at home because the price has shot up so high.
Oh, I really hope we don't go back to that. I think we did quite enough baking during lockdown. But the reason that I said the situation in French bakeries is that was what I got from this debate yesterday. When I looked at the picture, I immediately saw that on Twitter there was a widespread debate about the situation in French bakeries, the fact that these bakeries, of course, are having a lot of trouble paying for the energy that they need to be baking the bread, that inflation, of course, is extremely difficult for them at the moment. And so it's great that the baguette's on the list. It's also a very sad time for it to be going on that list.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been visiting bakers and talking to them about the challenges they're facing now with the cost of living crisis. It's getting worse and worse for them.
I think even if we cook it at home these days, it would be as costly as you buy it from a bakery because of the costs, because of the energy, and it should be temporary, I believe.
That's a very optimistic take there from yourself, right, Sundas?
I was going to say I understand the political perspective on it, but I think it's beautiful that we take the time to celebrate culture, so food, you mentioned dancing as well, different aspects of our heritage in Europe and also in the world. And of course, we should not forget the difficulties we are living in the world, but perhaps it can be a parenthesis where we remember to have a bit of fun as well.
To have a bit of fun, and that is, of course, the idea here. And we have a colleague here at Euronews, Paul, who was complaining that since he arrived to Brussels, he hasn't found yet a baguette that tastes as good as it does in France. So that would be a challenge for him. Anyone out there who has a tip, do let us know. But that is, I'm afraid, all we have time for. So thank you so much to Lara Wolters, Dutch Socialist MEP. Thanks
like
for being
with
here.
women on boards, I would tell him, look harder.
Look harder. Thanks again to Sundas Boulam for being with us, and Ahmed Yar, sociologist. And thank you so much to you for watching. We'll see you soon here on Euronews and Euronews.com.